Who was Mr. Showmanship, and what does Las Vegas owe to this superstar? Who invented the modern residency? And who was the highest paid entertainer in the world for 20 years running?
And whose over-the-top extravaganza shows set the mold for everybody from Elvis to Elton to Lady Gaga? It is Liberace, and we are here to celebrate his legacy.
So get ready, because this adventure starts right now. We'll be making several stops around the Las Vegas Valley during our little tribute. The first one is located on Valley View Boulevard inside the Springs Preserve. The Nevada State Museum Las Vegas has been making its home here since 2011, a beautiful 70,000 square foot facility dedicated to inspiring and educating its visitors with Nevada's history. It's not only fascinating, but the museum has also proven to be a valuable resource for us in making our videos and adding that historical context. Exhibits and displays on Las Vegas history cover its early beginnings. The hotels and casinos that became household names. The showgirls. The movies, and a priceless collection of black and white photographs from the past century. There's also a wing dedicated to temporary exhibits, and that's where we're going today to step into Liberace's world. Liberace Real and Beyond debuted in June and will run through the end of the year. In case you're too young to remember, Liberace was the most popular and most flamboyant pianist of the 20th century and had a stellar career that spanned more than 4 decades. The items on display here are on loan from the Liberace Foundation for the Performing and Creative Arts, most of which were actually in the Liberace Museum on Tropicana Avenue in times past. But more on that a little bit later on. We barely step inside the doorway and we find 2 examples of his most famous prop, the candelabra. Liberace, Walter to his family, Lee to his friends, was born in Wisconsin in 1919. And in an eerie parallel to Elvis, he too had an identical twin who died at birth. His parents were both musical, and by the time he was 4, he was already a prodigy on piano. By 7, he was memorizing difficult pieces, studying the technique of Polish pianist Paderewski. That gentleman became Liberace's mentor and family friend, and in fact, this portrait hung in the sitting room of his Hollywood mansion. The family were devout Roman Catholics, and this is his First Communion Bible circa 1931. In 1939, during a classical recital, the audience requested an encore of the Kay Kaiser World War II hit, Three Little Fishies. Liberace performed it in a semi-classical style, and the crowd absolutely loved it. By this time, he was performing in nightclubs, so he reinvented his act to be, in his own words, classical music with the boring parts left out. During the 40s, with performance contracts from Radisson and Statler hotels, he toured the country and made his debut in Las Vegas as well. Along the way, he dropped the classical and became a showman. Nowadays, Liberace is credited with inventing the residency in Las Vegas with his large-scale shows at the Riviera in the 1950s. By 1955, he was making $50,000 a week at the Riviera alone. Interesting story. When Elvis made his debut in Las Vegas in 1956, his shows were poorly received. Colonel Parker went and paid a visit to Liberace at the Riviera and asked if he'd come see the show and offer some advice. Liberace's response? The show needs more glitz, and the rest is history. Meanwhile, Liberace achieved stardom on television as well as in live performance, and in 1950 made his acting debut in South Sea Sinners starring Shelley Winters. 5 years later, he landed his first starring role in Sincerely Yours. It was during the 50s that Liberace added his trademark candelabra to the stage and began to embrace the extravagant. This gold lame jacket was his first leap from tux and tails to the spectacular costume changes he became known for. And this jacket, decorated with the signature candelabra, was the first of many electric costumes. By 1961, audiences were beginning to see a glimmer of what would become Mr. Showmanship. Liberace began using costume designers like Frank Acuna, who created this purple damask suit studded with rhinestones. On November 22, 1963, does that date ring a bell to anybody? Liberace was cleaning a costume in his Pittsburgh dressing room and was overcome by toxic dry cleaning fluid. He suffered kidney failure and was given only a 20% chance of survival. But after a visit from a mysterious nun in white who told him to pray to St. Anthony for healing, he recovered. He never found that mysterious nun, but the event deepened his Catholic faith, and he built a shrine to St. Anthony in his Palm Springs home. He even received a blessing from the Pope. Liberace returned to Las Vegas, and with the guidance from famed talent manager Seymour Heller, who by the way signed him in 1950 and represented him his whole life, transformed into Mr. Showmanship. The spectacle, costumes, entrances and exits, and elaborate choreography drew rave reviews, sold-out audiences, and gold records. And along the way, he gave a young singer named Barbra Streisand a hand up, coming on stage and warming up the crowd, introducing her as his opening act at the Riviera in the 1960s.
Liberace's love of entertaining was legendary as well. He loved to cook and hosted lavish dinner parties. He is quoted as saying, "Food and music are the best things in life," and loved to spend time in the kitchen with his mom. Fun fact, on the road, he carried his own pots, pans, and dishes, and even in hotel rooms, he was able to prepare meals for guests. Yes, that is a cooking station on top of the bathtub. In 1970, he published a cookbook of favorite recipes from his own kitchens called Liberace Cooks. Do I have that cookbook? You betcha!
This wall in the exhibit was very interesting. In an era and a town where segregation was common, Liberace socialized with and encouraged the careers of his fellow entertainers, regardless of race or origin. He gave hope to millions of gays in the less open years, and in fact, Elton John considered him a personal hero. In the 1970s, Liberace's popularity was at its peak. All right, hold on, my friends. I have got to stop the video here because I have a personal story about the fellow on the marquee, Vince Cardell. Vince was Liberace's first and only protege and toured the world with Liberace for many years. Shortly after I arrived in Las Vegas, I was booked to play in Reno at what was then the MGM Grand. Now it's called the Grand Sierra Resort. We rotated our acts in the Lions Club lounge right next to the casino, and we got to know each other while working there. He was an extraordinary pianist and a wonderful man. Unfortunately, Vince passed away at a very young age in 2012. Tell you what, my friends, it's funny how seeing one man's name can invoke so many wonderful memories. All right, let's get back to the video. Costumes ranged from a denim jumpsuit decorated with rainbow stones to the famous ostrich cape that made its debut in 1977. By this time, Michael Travis was designing the costumes, and I can't even list everything that went into this cape, so I'm just going to show you the placard. In his 1978 TV special, Leapin' Lizards, It's Liberace, he did a spoof of a typical day in Las Vegas, including a bubble bath in his marble tub. Throughout his life, Liberace collected and preserved antiques large and small. Here at the State Museum is a small collection from his miniature piano collection from all over the world and made of a variety of materials. This quote from his book, The Things I Love, tells you how passionate he was about his collections. Liberace embraced fame, success, and pop culture. He made guest appearances on TV shows over several decades, from The Monkees to Saturday Night Live, to cartoon caricatures on Family Guy and The Simpsons. Not to mention the dolls and the Liberace slot machine.
My friends, when I worked at the Liberace Museum, I worked in the little showroom they had called the Cabaret, and right before the show started, they had these slot machines out front, and I used to have to come and turn them all off so that they didn't make noise, and it was all done by those little levers right down there. This is not a huge collection that he had like at the museum, but this is very well represented, and we're enjoying it, having a good time.
It's the 80s, and Liberace's most spectacular look was still yet to come, courtesy of costume designer Michael Travis. The ice blue rhinestone suit. The purple and silver costume. Both so heavily encrusted with jewels, I can't even guess at their weight. It was during this era that Dale and I saw his live spectacular in the showroom at the Las Vegas Hilton circa 1982. But the Fabergé costume, worn for 21 performances at Radio City Music Hall, is the most famous of his career. During the opening number, Liberace emerged from a 12-foot-tall Fabergé Easter egg in this getup. The cape is made of pink turkey feathers, and even when he swept it off, this was the costume underneath. There's also a small display of shoes and bow ties, although we know there must be hundreds somewhere else. Liberace was famous for showing off his rings to the audience in the front row and reminding them that they paid for them.
And we saved the best for last. Liberace's famous rhinestone Baldwin grand piano and the matching rhinestone suit. These were used in 56 sold-out concerts at Radio City Music Hall in 1986. Not only was that a box office record, it was also the final stage performance for Mr. Showmanship. Next stop, the Liberace Mansion on Shirley Street, one of 7 homes that Liberace owned in his lifetime. He purchased 2 adjacent properties back in 1972 and performed massive renovations to join the 2 houses into a single 15,000 square foot residence. Over the years, he bought other homes for his staff to live in and built up a compound right here in the suburbs. You can see from out here the second-floor atrium, dubbed Moroccan Room, where Liberace entertained his show business pals after hours.
Our former showgirl friend Kathleen recalls an occasion in the 1970s when Liberace invited the cast of the show she was performing in to a party at this house. In her own words, "Later in Las Vegas, when I was in the show, I think it was the middle to late 70s when I was hired into the MGM Hallelujah Hollywood show, all the show kids were invited to a private party at his house. I don't remember too much except that he was so warm and inviting to everyone with whom he spoke, and careful to say to everyone, "Call me Lee." I was surprised to see him so casually dressed, a denim jacket and jeans to match, with hand painting airbrushed to match on both pieces. He was so charming. He walked through the party the whole evening talking with everyone, and with such ease and old-world manners as if you were the most important person at the party. I will never forget him. Your friendly showgirl, Kathleen.
After his death, the property fell into neglect, but 10 years ago it was purchased by UK businessman Martin Ravenhill for a mere $500,000. It took 3 years to restore it to its original glory, but in 2016, the Liberace Mansion opened for private events, tours, and as a filming location. Earlier, we mentioned Liberace's reverence for his collections. In 1976, he created the Liberace Foundation and endowed it with his collections: costumes, jewelry, and cars, as well as $4 million in cash. 3 years later, the Liberace Museum opened on East Tropicana Avenue with brother George as the director. At its peak, the museum was the third most visited attraction in Las Vegas after the Strip and Hoover Dam. The museum lasted for 31 years, closing its doors in 2010. For a short time, I had the unique privilege of being a volunteer at the Liberace Museum. Today, you can still see the outline of what was Liberace Plaza. The building nearest the street that used to house the cars is an escape room nowadays. But look how much of the original museum facade still remains. The tile portrait of Liberace is in perfect condition, and so is the mirrored architectural feature out front. This is a banquet hall nowadays. The jaunting marquee with the piano and candelabra is now a historical relic in the Neon Boneyard. We snapped this pic several years ago.
Now, we have it on good authority that we will find some history in here, what was once Liberace's Tivoli Gardens restaurant. To share his love of cooking and entertaining, Liberace opened the restaurant in 1983, adjacent to the museum, and hosted some of the biggest names in show business. It eventually closed in 2011, but has been given new life thanks to the owner of Pancho's Vegan Tacos, local entrepreneur Sakbi Melling. In partnership with the Liberace Foundation, they have restored 90% of the interior to its original glamour. To celebrate, the new Tivoli Gardens had a grand opening party on Liberace's birthday this past May. You can book this extraordinary venue for private events. Oh, and by the way, Pancho's Vegan serves some noteworthy all-vegan dishes just a few blocks from the Strip. Check them out.
Our final stop on the Liberace Grand Tour is over behind the Strip on Dean Martin Drive, the spot where some of his famous cars are on display. It's called the Hollywood Cars Museum, and for an entry fee of $20, you gain access to not only Liberace's cars and more of his priceless collections, but also lots of other cool vehicles for movies and TV. We can't show you inside because they have a very strict no video policy and photos for personal use only. But the collection is well worth your time. In 1987, just a few months after his triumphant run at Radio City Music Hall, Liberace passed away. With the recent opening of the exhibit at the State Museum and the return of Tivoli Gardens this year, it seems the perfect time to give this legend his due. During his stellar career, Liberace claimed Entertainer of the Year awards, Emmys, gold records, 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and was listed as the world's highest paid pianist in the Guinness World Book of Records. Las Vegas owes Liberace a huge debt. The Strip owes its glitzy, glamorous style to him. He set the standard. In 2019, on the occasion of his 100th birthday, this proclamation was issued recognizing Liberace as a pioneer who created the Modern Residency Act and the only Las Vegas icon whose jewels and costumes have been displayed in fashion and art installations from Paris to New York City. And just last year, Clark County renamed a street just behind what used to be the Las Vegas Hilton, the Westgate now, to Liberace Avenue in his honor. For those of us old enough to remember this outstanding showman and who have had the privilege of seeing him perform live, this, my friends, is a show business legacy that deserves to be preserved for future generations. Liberace remains a happy note in Las Vegas history, often imitated, but never equaled.
you.